Welcome to an emergency episode of the San Jose Hockey Now podcast. I'm Sheng Peng, editor-in-chief of San Jose Hockey Now. You can also find my work at MEC Sharks, Twitter, Sheng_Peng, and Blue Sky, Sheng Peng.
And I'm Keegan Now. You can find me on Twitter at @half_hockey, my website, half-hockey.com, or at San Jose Hockey Now. This week.
Well, first, I want to thank our sponsors, Sports Shots, Dean Tate, great photographer, love his work. Check his work out. Also, Kathy's Power Skating and Extra Hour Training. And we are looking for more sponsors. You can, if you're interested, you can email me at sjhockeynow@gmail.com.
This week. It is a emergency episode, like you mentioned. Earlier today on a early Saturday morning for San Jose hours, the San Jose Sharks traded Mikael Granlund, Cody, Ceci to the Dallas Stars for a 2025 first-round pick, which is Dallas's, and a conditional fourth-round pick that could turn into a third-round pick if certain conditions are met on the trade.
Well, the Stars make the final.
Yeah, if they make the final. Which is funny. We're going to mention it right off the top. It's been reported as a conditional fourth and a conditional third, and I think it's hilarious. That's just my initial reaction, because like you can spin it either way. It's Dallas says it's just conditional fourth.
Then I think the Sharks reported as conditional third.
Conditional
third. And maybe Dallas reports as conditional fourth. It's all PR. I remember, I think the same thing happening with the Timo Meier trade, where the extra pick, the one that was ended up being a second rounder. I think the conditions were New Jersey had to make the Eastern Conference final or something like that. I think if you look at the original trade, the tweet by the Sharks, that it was a conditional first.
I love that. It's whatever your PR team wants to say it is.
Yeah, exactly.
This I think was not a long time coming, but it was at least a long time speculated about these players, because they are both UFAs to be at the end of the season. Mikael Granlund finishing out the end of his 2 years after being acquired in the Erik Karlsson trade, and then Cody Ceci obviously in the last year, his deal coming over in the Ty Emberson trade in the middle of the summer. So initial reactions. Do you want to go, Shaq? What are your initial thoughts on this trade? Did you like it? Did you not like it? And then we'll go from there.
I don't like it. I don't. I think that it is a fair return. If you look at last year, the top UFA centermen, Sean Monahan, Adam Henrique, Elias Lindholm, they all went for first round picks as a centerpiece of the trade. Lindholm got a little bit more. He got a pretty good prospect in the, I can't say his name, but the Hunter Bruskevich.
Bruce.
He's a pretty good prospect, right? So, so he got a little bit more, but that's the kind of the basic quadrant for a top UFA rental centerman. So this obviously fulfills that, but I think overall, if you look at what Granlund's value is to the Sharks beyond on the ice, his value to the Sharks as a leader, as a hands-on person with William Eklund, Fabian Zetterlund, Macklin Celebrini, Will Smith. And I know that initial reaction is, or a lot of media reaction is, well, you still have Tyler Toffoli there. You still have Barclay Goodrow there. You have down the line, different leaders, right? But what I would remind people of is that leadership comes in different ways. People lead in different ways. And the exact way that Granlund led, that hands-on, doing skills with the guys, Granlund's work ethic, right? That's not exactly how those other guys lead that I mentioned. And that's not a knock on other guys, but specifically, though, that how Granlund led is, I think, how he is, at least for this Sharks locker room, fairly one of a kind. And so I think that's a big part of it that's really, really underrated. You don't just say, oh, you have other leaders. Obviously, the other leaders will have to take up the mantle with Granlund gone. There's no choice. Sharks have no choice now. But I think that I wouldn't diminish that. Also, too, from what I understand in terms of Granlund, of course, is a UFA. I know he's 32. I know that you don't want to lock up a guy of that age, a rebuilding team. It doesn't make sense. But from what I understand, from what I've heard, that I don't think Granlund was looking for 8 years or 7 years or whatever, anything really, really super long term. I think that from what I've heard, that there was no plan to ask for anything that would have locked up or would have tied Mike Greer's hands in terms of flexibility. And I don't know exactly what that means. Like, does it mean a 2-3 year contract that kind of dovetails with Macklin Celebrini's the end of Macklin Celebrini's ELC, or try to dovetail with the Macklin Celebrini bridge contract, right? I'm not sure exactly what that means, right? But that at least that was there was a sensitivity to that, and so there was a chance here to sign somebody that wanted to be here. That's a very, very key thing here too. People talk about I like the Thomas Hurdle trade.
Yeah.
I didn't think I didn't think as much of the return for the Eric Carlson trade. I remember I was a little more lukewarm on that. Obviously, I worked out well with the Pittsburgh pick being what it was, turning to Sam Dickinson, and obviously Granlund turning out to be the player that he was in that trade. But I understood both those trades, though, as guys who wanted to leave. Brent Burns wanted to leave. Mikael Granlund did not want to leave. Like I mentioned, I believe that he would have been okay with signing a shorter term, higher AAV contract. I'm just speculating. It might have been a stupid AAV where you're like, oh, but then you think about it, the Sharks have plenty of cap space and they're in no hurry. So they could have committed, they could have signed. I mean, the same premise that I talked about last summer when I said, hey, throw $10 million at Brady Shea per year or something like that. Same kind of premise, right? You could have thrown that kind of money at Mikael Granlund for just a couple of years, and it's a win-win. He gets another chance at a big contract, but you get him around for his mentorship and for also his on the ice play. The other part of it too that I'm not a big fan of is while I say the return was fair, it's no overpayment. Like I said, that's about right for what you expect for a good centerman on the market, as we saw last year, a good UFA rental centerman. And it's I talked with a couple of amateur scouts today, amateur NHL scouts, and this draft is on the
not
week
amazing.
to average, on the week to average side. Yeah. And so we're talking about a pick then that projects to be a late pick in a week to average draft. So that's not an overpayment in any sense to me. And so I think in the end, if you're going to trade a guy like Mikael Granlund and what he meant on the ice, of course, but those points can't be replaced. I don't doubt that. You can find that in free agency, but off the ice, though, which cannot be replaced so easily, for essentially a late first rounder, I don't really love it.
I think, well, I guess a couple things. I think the trade doesn't. You're right. It doesn't have to. It's not like that. We were like Mikael Granlund was like, I'm leaving. Kind of like when they came to a head with Mackenzie Blackwood and he had his number, and Mike Greer was like, probably not for us. It didn't seem like that was the thing, especially in Mike Greer's availability. He kind of went off on that a little bit. You could talk about it.
Yeah. Let me address it after you're done. Yeah. So let me, go ahead first.
But I don't know. I think it's I think it's smart GMing. I don't know if it's anything more than that. I think Mikael Granlund is 32. He's on an expiring contract. You have no idea if you're going to get a deal done or not. And even if you do get a deal, it may not be a deal that helps your team long term. It may not be a deal that helps your team short term, just because Mikael Granlund's older. He's had inconsistencies in his career, even if with the Sharks he's been pretty good. And very good even at points, the best player on the Sharks. But I feel like it's smart GMing just because it was a distressed asset that he immediately improved into a first round pick. And where the Sharks are, Mikael Granlund would be super important, but I think there's too many possibilities that the deal ends up bad if you keep Mikael Granlund, that I think that getting a first round pick is what you got to do. And yeah, even in the availability, he mentioned why they want that first, and we'll talk about that too. But I don't know. It's kind of tough because I do like him, and the guys in the locker room like him, and it seems like he meshes really well with guys like Eklund and Zetterlund and Celebrini, and it's hard to get like the habits of your of your super high prospects. They have to match habits of really high skilled players, and we don't have really high skilled veterans. We have, for better or worse, guys that do not have that skill level as our vets. Guys like Goodrow and Cunnin, and I mean Tivoli's got a little bit more skill there, but like they have to match certain habits of high skill players, and Granlund was kind of it. So I see what you're saying, but I think I would take that trade. There's just too much uncertainty with paying Granlund more money, I think, and they could still do it if they felt like they wanted to. If you throw $7 million at Granlund in the offseason, you might be able to get him. Might. It never really happens, but if this is a situation where he wants to come back, you could still do it.
Well, yeah, I can talk about a number of things that you just mentioned. First, in terms of Granlund coming back,
yeah,
he really liked it here, so this is possible. But it doesn't mean though that he's tied to this place at all. Though, what if he goes to Dallas? He likes it there. There's a good chance he's going to like it there. Dallas is a well-run organization, very successful. So,
yeah.
Jim Neal also mentioned already in a discussion with Sean Shapiro. Follow Sean's work, great writer. He's covers the Stars.
Mm-hmm.
And Jim Neal said that Granlund's a guy that he would be a candidate for an extension. And so there's reasons why what you said basically never happens. It happens, but very, very rarely, right? And so I wouldn't count on it. Granlund's going to go to a new place. Chances are it's gonna be a place that he's gonna like. Mm-hmm. And so again, if he comes back and you get a first round pick out of it, then of course that's a great trade. But that's not, again, I wouldn't count on it. That's like a pie in the sky. Mm-hmm. It's a big hope. I guess I can say that, like, I am very, very certain that there is no prearranged deal for Granlund to come back, if that's what you guys are hoping for. So I'm very, very certain of that.
The odds are very slim regardless. It just doesn't.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen.
So I'll add to some of the other things too that you mentioned. It's always a risk, whatever you take, right? But I think a big part of it is that there was a willingness, from my understanding, to sign a shorter term contract. So that mitigates some of that risk already, right? That Granlund's not asking for, I don't think he was asking for 6 years, or I don't even know, for 5 years or something like that, right? So I think that's a big part of it too. So of course there's a risk. He's 32, is going to be 33, I think, later this month. So there's always that kind of risk, but who knows? He also can continue producing like he has too. One of the things that I think that we talked a lot about before when the trade first happened, right? And we talked about how he had difficulty transitioning in a new environment when he got traded from Minnesota to Nashville, and then from Nashville to Pittsburgh, right? Mm-hmm. But in the last couple of years, though, I learned that in that season, 2022-23 in particular, that he was going through a lot of kind of personal issues. And the kind of stuff that would make you understand why it was a difficult transition for him to go anywhere, not Pittsburgh in particular. And so those are the kind of things that make that make me think that there's not, he was playing his best hockey ever. He was in his best shape ever, that sort of thing. And so of course he's 33, anything can happen, but there was a good bet though that he was going to continue producing, at least on a shorter term contract. Mm-hmm. And with a guy that cares like he did. Just like you bet on a Brent Burns kind of, because you know how hard this guy is going to work. And of course, it doesn't always work out. Guys get old kind of overnight, right? That can happen. But if you're going to bet on somebody, though, that I think that he was a pretty good bet. The other part of it too, you mentioned the Blackwood thing, right? I think that these are very, very different situations. And I've heard this I've read it mentioned in my mentions or whatever responses, right? And so Blackwood signed a 5-year contract with the Avalanche. That would obviously butt up against Askarov's 2-year contract. Askarov's contract expires in 2026-27. And at that point, Askarov you're hoping he's good enough that he's going to command some starter type money there. And at that point, it doesn't make sense to pay a Blackwood $5 million, right? And so I think that's a big difference here, where specifically, like I mentioned, that there was again, I don't know exactly what it looked like. I can't speak to that, but there would have been a sensitivity to, again, Celbrini's contract, his bridge contract, Will Smith's contract, and that sort of thing. That Mikael Granlund wasn't asking to stay here for the rest of his career necessarily. So I think that's a big difference here. And the other part of it too is just the positions too. Goaltending is more easier to find. Finding Askarov's partner, whoever that's going to be in the coming years, is going to be way easier to find than to find a high skill top six centerman who is great not only on the ice but in the room, and also wants to be part of your rebuild.
Yeah.
All these things, right? All these things are very, very hard to find in concert with one guy. And it also makes me think too that kind of one of those having the bird in the hand, that sort of thing, right? The Sharks really lucked out with Granlund in a way. And of course, credit to Mike Greer for getting Granlund in that Karlsson trade, which looks better and better by the day. Obviously, we hear that Pittsburgh is kind of starting to reset or rebuild or whatever, right? And so Karlsson's a guy that they're going to make available. But so credit to Mike Greer for that. But so when they make that trade, they make that Erik Karlsson trade, and they get Mikael Granlund as a cap dump. At that point, you have ahead of Granlund on the depth chart, you have Logan Couture, you have Tomas Hertl, and you have those two guys again. And I remind you that people lead differently. Not all leaders are the same, but that Couture and Hertl, yes, they were leaders too, and obviously they were great players on the ice, and they were players that worked hard at both ends on the ice too. A little bit like Granlund. And so you had those guys kind of ahead of Granlund on the depth chart, and in sort of some of the leadership ways too. At the time of the trade, Couture, the captain, still the captain, but hasn't played in a couple of years. Hertl was the alternate captain. Now, obviously, we know what's kind of happened with Couture, that he's only played 6 games in the last 2 years, and we have no idea if he's going to play again. There's really no sense of that at this point. And even if he's able to, he's 35. And so we have no idea if he is able to play again. I hope he does. Hope he can end his career on his own terms. But whatever he brings, whatever he does, it's just going to be, doesn't matter what he does on the ice at this point. If he makes it back, just going to be a victory that he's even on the ice. You don't even think about what he can do at this point, because he's at an age where players retire or their careers kind of taper off already. Hertl signs his 8-year extension in March 2022 under a different regime. People forget this different regime, a regime that was tied into the Doug Wilson regime, that was still trying to kick the can forward, try to keep it going in terms of the core of the team, try to stay competitive. Obviously, they have been failing for years, but I believe that Hertl signed under the premise that they were going to keep trying. So I don't blame Hertl for signing. I know a lot of fans are like, couldn't he see that it was not going to work out? Well, of course you could guess that. I could see it wasn't going to work out, because that's why I didn't like the extension. But if people wave 8 years of good money in your face and they tell you we're going to do this and that, okay, well, you can give him a chance, because he does love San Jose, and he wanted to give them a chance. And that summer, though, the Sharks hire a new GM and Mike Greer, and it's pretty clear pretty quickly what's going to happen with the Sharks, that they are headed toward a rebuild. First, they trade Brent Burns off. Burns wanted to leave. They start the season with Timo Meier, Erik Karlsson, and Tomas Hertl and Logan Couture. And I think that Mike gives them a chance at the beginning of 2022-23 to see if something will stick. Nothing sticks. If you guys remember, actually, that still makes me laugh. A month into the season, a month into this new Sharks regime, David Quinn as the head coach, you still have a lot of your star players, except for Brent Burns. A month of the season at the Hall of Fame, or after the Hall of Fame induction ceremony or whatever, Mike Greer says, yeah, basically everybody's available except for Tomas Hertl.
Yeah, it was kind of, writing was on the wall.
Writing was on the wall, and the Sharks kept losing that year. That didn't help. And then the first clear move that, okay, like they are going to rebuild was when they traded Timo Meyer, because they had a choice there. They had a very clear choice of what they could have done there. They could have tried to extend Timo and try to kick the can forward, or Timo didn't necessarily want to leave like Brent Burns did, and they chose to trade him. And so that was kind of a clear sign. So anyway, so going back to Tommy though, like Hertl was looking out the door basically, from not since the extension was signed, but basically shortly thereafter. And I don't blame him, because it wasn't a winning situation that he was hoping for, that I believe that he was promised. So anyway, so you lose anyway in the last couple of years the guys who were kind of ahead of Granlund in sort of that leadership on and off the ice, skill player too. Oh, you mentioned also too a particular fit for Granlund with these players too, which I've mentioned before. Granlund was the 9th pick of the 2010 draft by the Minnesota Wild. He was super hyped when he came over from Finland. I think he was already a star in Finland. He was a world championship star. I think he did like the Michigan in some world championships. I was reading about that, or remembering that recently, that he did that as a 19-year-old, I think, at a world championships or something like that. So he was already a star, and there was so much placed on him in Minnesota that this was the guy that was going to lead them to championships and stuff like that. And it didn't quite work out. He wasn't quite able to do that in Minnesota. He wasn't quite a superstar 1C, but he ended up being a really, really good player, as we've seen in San Jose and other stops too. Really good two-way player. I think a very, very solid, say, second line center on a very good team, and no shame in that. Anyway, though, he's the exact kind of guy that was perfect for Macklin Celebrini to talk to, 1st overall pick, for Will Smith, 4th overall pick to talk to, and obviously for William Eklund, which we saw, 7th overall pick to talk to. High skill, a lot of expectations. How do you manage that? How do you deal with that? Also, a forward, a center, just like Macklin, just like Will. So there are a lot of things that really work, that the Sharks kind of, like I said, lucked into, that just kind of worked in Mikael's kind of mentorship of the players. And also reminds me too of leadership too, and in the sense of kind of switching topics just slightly, but very related. So yesterday we saw JT Miller get traded.
Sure.
And JT Miller, different quarters, you hear different things. You hear that he is too much for the locker room, or that he's the guy that drags you into the fight, right? And you hear too about how JT and Elias Pettersson didn't get along, that JT was maybe a little too kind of hard on Pettersson, right? And would a JT Miller work in a Sharks locker room? Fuck no. Right? But Granlund had a way of, and I've talked with multiple people about this, going back to David Quinn, and Warsawski has echoed the same thing, and Will Smith and Macklin Celebrini too, and obviously Eklund and Zetterlund, that Mikael Granlund, that wasn't his style of leadership. He was a quiet, take you off to the side, talk to you kind of guy, listen to your point of view. It wasn't a my way or the highway kind of thing, like it sounds like it was for JT Miller. And they're both leaders, right? JT Miller is a leader. If you put him in the right situation, if you put him in a winning situation, I'm sure that JT is going to look much better in that kind of situation. Sure. And anyway, so that's just a reminder that there are very clear different styles of leadership here. It is not one size fits all leadership. And so that's a kind of echoes back to what I said earlier. But so anyway, don't like this trade.
That was a very long-winded way of saying you didn't like it.
Well, I'm saying the same thing that I did before, but I'm responding directly to the things that you mentioned.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. I think, I mean, it's just, there's also the argument again that we've had 2 years of Granlund. He's done well. We still have lost. We've still been bad.
That's not why he was here, though. I know that Mikael Granlund is not as good a player as JT Miller, or he's not on a good team. He's not your 1C. I understand all that. That's why I've hardly mentioned his points, right? Like the on-the-ice stuff, it's good. He's a skilled player. He can play with them. He can finish plays that Macklin makes or Will makes. That's very, very important. But more importantly, though, again, that's why I mentioned the off the ice and his ability to relate to the skilled players, because he was in our position once, but also too that he has a manner about him that fits with the younger players and talking with them, unlike, let's say, a JT Miller in the Sharks locker room.
Well, I think
And
back to before we go into another.
mm-hmm.
I think Greer also mentioned specifically why he's trying to get another first round pick and get more picks. And at least part of the availability was talking about acquiring, somebody for now and the future, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like either
Sure.
a prospect that is going to fill a need for the Sharks, or a young vet in their 20s, is what he said.
Sure.
Specifically, I think not just an older 20s, like a younger 20s. And I think he knew he wasn't going to be able to get that if it came available unless he had an extra pick.
Mm-hmm.
And that it seems like we even mentioned that after Yurchek was traded,
and Nemec wasn't traded, but as like
he's available,
yeah,
that he didn't have the right thing, right? We're not going to
sure.
trade our first, and a team's going to want a first round pick for
Sure.
whatever
Fair.
this thing is. So I think Greer just kind of weighed those options and is trying to figure out what to do with it. We'll see if he ends up picking with this pick or not, or using it to trade up. Who knows? But I would be surprised if they just pick a player in the 20s. Like if Dallas gets the 26th pick or whatever, I would be surprised if they just pick at 26. I think they're either trading up or they're trading the pick entirely, or trading down. I don't know, but I don't think he's going to stick like right in that range, just because this draft isn't that kind of draft where you're going to get a super good player in the 20s. I think you're going to either want more picks or trade out of it. That's just my opinion.
Right. And okay, that I think is a very I actually agree with your argument. We kind of can't judge this trade until we know what happens with that pick. Not like, oh, you made the pick and he turns out to be Marc-Edouard Vlasic and he's awesome. He's a star veteran for 15 years. I don't mean like that kind of hindsight. That's easy, but I mean like that. Yeah, that pick can be moved pretty quickly or something. And so if you're telling me that the Sharks, and actually this is exactly what happened to Tomas Hertl, right? That they traded Tomas Hertl for a first and David Edstrom, and that a lot of fans were unhappy with that. But then a few months later, you basically trade that Edstrom in the first for Yaroslav Askarov, and fans were a lot happier with that, right? And so that I agree with. So if, like, for example, you tell me that the Sharks traded Granlund like straight up for Nemec, for example. And I'm not saying that's a trade that the Devils would do, but I'm just trying to give an example, right? Then I would be like, okay, I would not underrate, once again, Granlund's impact to the room and the leadership, right? But at least, though, you're getting something that can help Macklin Celebrini and company be good sooner than later, instead of an 18-year-old 6'5" defenseman with the 23rd pick that isn't going to be ready for 5-6 years or something. Be a star in 5-6 years. So that point, I agree with you that there is a little bit of wait and see to that, and that there's a lot that can be done with a first round pick as a centerpiece that can get you something that can help you. And help you in a room too. I don't know who Mike is kind of targeting there. Maybe get somebody younger than Granlund.
Yeah, maybe he goes out and gets like Dylan Cousins from Buffalo or something, or like I don't know. Anyway, there's that part of it, and I think also in general, Meiker essentially is acquired like an entire draft class for free, right? Like he acquired Mackenzie Blackwood for like a 6th round pick, trade him for a 2nd and a 5th. Or 2nd, 5th/4th, could be up to a 4th. He acquired Granlund and Cody Ceci. Well, he got Ceci for a free waiver hiccup in Emberson and got 2 thirds out of it.
And got a third out. Yeah, right.
3rd/ and another 3rd and a 4th. And then Granlund for not free, but essentially free in the Pittsburgh trade. So he's acquiring a 1st, a 2nd, a 3rd, a 4th, a 5th, all for free in like the span of a year and a half. Not free, but like essentially free. Distressed assets, we'll call them. And then he's, getting an entire draft class back for a team that really needs a lot of draft capital, or needed a lot of draft capital and all sorts of capital. I don't know. I think there is that argument that we're taking the step backward again. But I think Greer also is looking at the team on the ice and said the team's already taken a step backward. Like they're taking a step forward in terms of like the competitiveness, but the team is still not there. So maybe he thought if, this team is the 8th best or 8th worst team in the league instead of the worst team in the league, that maybe they keep Granlund and then build on it. But they're not. They're still the worst team in the league. So maybe this isn't over yet. Maybe that's his thoughts.
Yeah, and that's fair. Maybe this isn't over part yet. It definitely is in there. The one thing that I would caution, though, and we talked about this with Blackwood, that I don't really care that much about. Oh, he turned a 6th-round pick into a 2nd-round pick in Blackwood, or you care. We talked about Mikey Asimont, right? My favorite guy to.
But the whole draft class for free is important.
No, I understand that. Like, it is like on paper, it's good GMing. I don't argue that. You turn Mikael Granlund a cap dump into essentially a 1st-round pick. We haven't talked much about Cody Ceci, but that though I think you can kind of break down that the 1st is for Granlund and the 3rd/4th, whatever that is for Ceci. Which actually I thought it was maybe a little light for Ceci, but that's beside the point. I thought Ceci might generate at least a solid locked in 3rd, but that's kind of semantics there, kind of picking at it there, but. Anyway, though, going back to
I also find
Granlund, though,
real quick aside about the 3rd, 4th thing. I find it so dumb that GMs do that. Because if they're making the finals, you don't really care, and then like it also ties up like those 2 picks. Like it makes it harder to trade one or the other as well. So I don't know. I think it's just dumb. Just give them the 3rd. Who cares?
Exactly. Just give them the 3rd. But
it's a $20 bill. Just give them the 3rd.
But anyway, I think with Granlund here to the point that we're talking about that don't, like you said, we don't know what's going to happen. There's some, you can do something good with that, but that leadership, I think, is again I'm going to say that no matter what, that I think that part is really, really important. He was the right guy. It doesn't matter if they were in 32nd place or 25th place. We talk a lot about the right guy, right? That's something that I've thought a lot about recently, and I think we've touched on it on other podcasts, that if the Sharks make a big free agent signing this summer, following past kind of examples of the Bruins signing Zdeno Chara when they weren't actually a very good team, 12-year contract back when they signed him to that. The Blackhawks signing Marian Hossa, granted, they were just coming off of conference finals there, but still 12-year contract for like a 29-year-old forward, big risk there. That they gave these huge contracts to the right guys. And I'm not saying that Granlund was the right guy in the Hossa Chara sense. I'm not saying if Granlund's agent wanted, I don't know, I think like 5 years plus is a non-starter for me. I think 4 and under would have thought about it. That's me, at least. So I think that Granlund was the right guy for this room. And as a team gets better, of course, you want Granlund to be more. You want Macklin to be your clear-cut elite center. You want Granlund to slide down to be your 2, maybe 3C when you're good. If you did re-sign Granlund, there's nothing wrong with that, right? But again, though, in terms of just the fit, I just think the fit was really, really good. The Sharks lucked into a really, really good fit. Granted that they can turn this Dallas pick into something spectacular still. I'm not saying it was a terrible trade. I'm not saying it was a stupid trade. Like I said, I think that the return was fair. So I'm not saying somehow that Mike Rear got fleeced somehow or anything like that. He didn't. It was, I think, a fair trade. But I'll just say again that for the underrated intangible value that Granlund brought, that I would have wanted an overpayment if you're going to tear that guy out of your locker room.
And I guess there's also only 28 games left. So
it's going to be a long 28 games, dude.
I know, but I meant like even if you're really stuck on Granlund, by rights, he's got 28 games left in a Sharks jersey. Even if you're really sold on Granlund, his rights, his agent he's got 28 games left in a Sharks jersey.
Right. Well, but my assumption is obviously that he's going to re-sign that's part of what we talked about, that he would re-sign at a reasonable length at least.
And I guess
maybe higher
if we're talking about like unlikely scenarios, which is a player comes back, how likely is it a guy like that sticks around a rebuilding bad team?
I told you though, he liked it here. That's what I'm insisting to you. This isn't the Hurdle situation that Hurdle wanted to leave. There's no that's like that guy wanted to, and I understand again, there's no criticism of Tommy. He wanted to leave. Eric Carlson wanted to leave so bad. They wanted to try to make the playoffs and chase the Stanley Cup. Granlund did not have that. That's what I'm telling you. This is not like
Then he can come back. If he wants to be here so badly, he can come back.
Well, he can, but I'm not saying he doesn't want to win either, right? I'm just saying that, like I mentioned with Granlund, that he had personal issues, right? That year before he came here, and he actually he gave me a statement, and actually the statement I think is accurate to what happened. That I think let me very quickly pull it up because I don't want to paraphrase words, his direct words. Granlund said, I think it was the right place at the right time for me and the Sharks.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that actually puts it as well as any writer could. That's exactly, I think that it was just right place, right time for him. Granlund at that point in his career, he hadn't missed the playoffs except for that Pittsburgh, the little stint he was in Pittsburgh. But I don't think he had missed the playoffs at all up to that point in his career. So no, I don't think he had a sense of how much he was gonna like it here.
Yeah.
And I think that the young kids here really energized him. And he's mentioned it too, talking with them, that they listen. William Eklund, Fabian Zetterlund, give them so much credit. Give those guys credit for being sponges. They listened to Granlund. Macklin Celebrini, Will Smith, those guys made it not just tolerable to be here for a guy like Granlund, but exciting to be here. He's a guy that really would have wanted to be here. Obviously, he wasn't going to be here for. No, I know he can, but but the way these things work, you go somewhere else, you're happy there, you're going to sign there. If Dallas goes, let's say they make it to the conference finals, right? I'm not saying they got to win the Stanley Cup or something like that, but they make it to the conference finals. They offer Granlund a decent contract. Well, he's there. He's happy too. So I'm not saying that I
think it's just a lot of if scenarios that are all building into this idea that that's exactly what happened. That
I'm just saying he liked it here, and that for a contract that, and this is my belief, yes, but from what I've heard, from what I understand, that the contract would have been like reasonable for the Sharks in some kind of way.
Yeah.
And he would have stayed and been happy to play the mentor and also put up 60 points too, which is a nice part of the bargain too. And play in all situations. One thing I did find is that, speaking to Granlund's value, and yes, it's for a lot worse team, but Granlund is the only forward in the league to lead the forwards on his team in overall ice time, and power play ice time, and in shorthanded ice time per game. Only one besides Jack Eichel. So yes, again, Granlund's doing it for a lot worse team, but he is, he's a really, really valuable player on the ice in all situations, like that stat I think suggests.
Sure.
I think he wanted to stay. And I think that he was not just a good influence or a decent influence on the young guys, but I think he was a fantastic influence on them. And I think that there are players on the Sharks, that the youngsters on the Sharks, right? I think Macklin is a guy that is so self-driven that maybe you put him in any situation, he'll be fine. But there's other youngsters on the Sharks that aren't Macklin. And a guy like Granlund, I think, is very valuable to really your entire organization up and down, for, again, just a model kind of player on both sides of the ice, model in terms of effort, model in terms of battle, being a smaller guy. A guy like Gushin, Bordelot, if they had the Granlunds compete, that's what you're looking for smaller guys. So not just mentioning the big names, right? Your Macklins, your Will Smiths, your Eklunds, or whatever. So yeah, I know there's a lot of ifs here, but again, I think I'm sure the guy wanted to stay, and obviously not just for any amount of money. He wasn't going to sign him for like 2 years and like, I don't know, it's the same contract he had before. I think he's earned a raise. But I think a lot of these ifs that you talk about are things that I'm telling you, like the guy wanted to stay. And to get a good player, a great leader who wants to be here for it. They even look like the Sharks signed Tyler Toffoli this past summer day to give Tyler a 3-year no move clause. Like you had to kind of to get a guy to come here. Yes, Macklin is an attraction. The energy, the team, the franchise is on an upswing. That's an attraction, right? But you've got to overpay to get a guy to be here, right? A guy like Tyler Toffoli, right? And so, in some sense, yes, you did have to overpay for Granlund too to have him stay here. But I think, like I mentioned, that it was a reasonable overpay though, because it wouldn't have been of a contract length. I think that would have been unreasonable. And in the same sense of you had to overpay to keep him, I think that you could have also made another team overpay to get him in a trade. Like one thing that I think you might agree with is that this doesn't feel like an overpayment, right? Like a first for Granlund. Like it feels good, but
No,
a late first,
it
it's not an
doesn't.
overpayment, right?
It doesn't feel like an overpayment because we know that Granlund's good. The problem is that NHL GMs think that Granlund is Granlund from 2 years ago. That was a cap dump from Pittsburgh, and
No,
like
but they don't though. They don't. That's what
well,
like
at least
he
one of
put
them
that
didn't.
on the record for the last 2 years, though, right?
But
That yeah, 2 years ago they thought he was a captain, but obviously what he's done in San Jose.
I
I
still
can
think,
mention this.
and
Go
this
ahead.
was even last year when we were talking about Granlund. It still was mentioned even on Elliot Friedman's podcast that teams are still
Fair.
not convinced. Like it's not, and he's playing 5 minutes more a night than he was playing the year like 2 years before. He's playing the every minute under San Jose's ice, and
Right.
I don't know. It's like I think it's a fair payment. I agree. It's not an overpayment. It's not an underpayment. It's like what Granlund's worth is probably a first round pick, right?
But from last year, right? And I wrote the same articles too. I talked to a lot of scouts who didn't think that they didn't like the extra year on Granlund's contract last year. So
Sure.
I think too that one thing that I was not sure about is just that Granlund's size would play in the playoffs for teams looking for a playoff center. So that's one thing I wasn't sure about, and I mentioned that many times. But
or now, what do we do with Granlund and down the lineup? I guess.
But
continue. Sorry.
Yeah, but though from last year, there's another year of tape of Granlund doing it all for the Sharks in all situations and being productive, right? Showing the same kind of compete and battle and attentiveness to two-way play that he's always shown, right? So he is the kind of like peak Granlund. And I also want to remind you too that you talk about, oh, he's doing all this for the Sharks, and that is a terrible team to do. Right. I get that, but Granlund's last full year in Nashville, I think that he led the Predators, I believe, because I used the stat before in many articles. He led a good Predators team, not a great Predators team, but a good Predators team in ice time for forwards. So it's not like he's only done this for crap teams. So I think I think teams can see that the Granlund that they're trading for now is more reminiscent of 2020, 21 or 2021, 22 Granlund than the Granlund from 2022, 23.
Yeah.
And I think too, as time goes on too, like the personal issues that I mentioned, right? Like I didn't know that when the Sharks first traded for him. I just thought, oh, cap dump, terrible in Pittsburgh, on the downswing of his career, smaller center. Okay, we'll see how it goes. He's had good years 2 years ago, but the Sharks had acquired a lot of guys like that who didn't work out as well, right? And during that kind of phase of the tear down rebuild, a lot of guys that were bigger names in the past. But over time, people get to know too. Oh yeah, there might be some reason why he wasn't very good in Pittsburgh, and it wasn't as good that year, and so that word gets around, and so people start to change their minds a little bit too. Like, oh, okay, so I feel better about this. So obviously, Jim Nill isn't too worried about Granlund coming in and being sort of having to adjust to Dallas, right? Like it seemed like he had to adjust, like Granlund had to adjust to going to Nashville the first time or going to Pittsburgh the first time. So things change is what is I guess the point though, that I hear what you're saying, that there were questions last year. But another year of good play by Granlund. Another year of excellent leadership and mentorship of the new guys, not just Eklund and Zetterlund, but of Celebrini and Smith. And I think too, for some reason, yeah, I do agree. It on principle, it seems like a player with 2 years left should be worth more. Even 2 years ago, you knew, or last year, you knew the cap was rising too. So getting him for 2 playoff runs, he should be worth more. But a lot of times, it's just not what happens. Maybe GMs are risk aversive in a way, so they like to trade for that rental because they know if he doesn't work out, okay, we're not committed to his money at least. Whatever reason, but that wasn't a plus for Granlund last year, his extra year on a contract, and maybe it should have been, but it wasn't. But anyway,
he seems like the kind of guy that is gonna make more money. Like he's never, as Mikael Celebrini grows and everything, he's gonna be the number one center on the team. He's gonna be pushed down the lineup as he ages, and he's not going to be worth the contract that he signed for. Whether or not that means, on the ice for production, he's not going to be $7 million. Whether or not that means, like, does he make up for it in other areas? It's possible. It's very likely that he does, contribute to the development of the kids, and that matters for the salary. But it just feels like he's one of these guys that this is the trap that NHL GMs get caught in a lot. Is this they pick a guy and he's 32 or 31 and he has been good before, and then as aging curves happen, they dive off a cliff, but they're making $8.5 million or $7-8 million or whatever, and they're stuck, and then they end up trading JT Miller for peanuts, or they end up trading like these guys because they're not worth what they signed for anymore. They're being paid for what they have done in the past rather than what they can do in the future. And I think at some point, Greer looked at the situation as a whole and realized how he got Granlund, how important he's been. He's done great for 2 years, and decided this had to happen, I think. But yeah. I don't know. I can understand the arguments for keeping him, but I also don't think I think we've had, again, the time to prove that it will help for development, theoretically, but it's not going to be the reason why the Sharks win the Stanley Cup is because Mikael Granlund was here for the next 2 years or 3 years.
Oh, I disagree with that. How a guy can affect the room matters a lot. I think that he is the exact guy that I would want a lot of the young players to learn from on the Sharks, and will help them win the Stanley Cup one day. Mikael Granlund may not be there to raise it, to hoist the cup, but I think.
But that's not the way that the NHL works.
Well, and let me add on to what you said. That this is the same argument with Logan Couture, right? That his contract, that what was he going to age into, and was he still going to be a useful player at the end of his contract as maybe a third line center? And does that make that more okay to make this leap with his contract? And the argument was, well, maybe it does, right? That there's still a use for a guy. And so I think it's okay for Granlund to kind of age. Let's say they assign him to say a 3-year, $27 million contract, like really high AAV, right? And I don't really see the issue with that if that's a contract that he would have signed, because chances are he's not going to be terrible throughout the contract, right? It's only 3 years. And then if somehow he is, that's a risk you took, and you get out of it quickly because it's only for 3 years. Like, again, right. No one is suggesting that.
But we just got out of all of these things. We just got out of all of these big contracts.
Yeah, but no one's suggesting 7-8 years. This is not Brent Burns 31 signing 8-year contract.
No, it's 33-year-old Granlund. 33,
but you're
he's 38.
Much shorter. Okay, but much shorter term.
I know.
And again, that there is a very important element of leadership here, like a very direct impact. So I'm not saying that this is a contract I would have given to any other 32, 33-year-old on the Sharks, 31-year-old, whatever, right? But I do think that he had a specific impact on the Sharks. And look at even how the Sharks were kind of meant to be a couple years ago, that I think that there was meant to be a guy like that around, like a Couture type, right? Mm-hmm. But Couture just hasn't been able to be around because of his injury.
Yeah.
And there was only one retention spot after they got rid of Burns and Carlson. I think that the plan was always to try to get rid of those two first. They combination of bigger contracts, and also to Burns wanted, reward for Burns' services, whatever, right? And so I joked about this a couple years ago, but it was Hurdle and Couture kind of competing to get out of San Jose. And the idea was probably that Couture was just going to be first to it, just because he had a contract that would be a little more, maybe I thought more movable, because it was going to expire sooner, and that would leave Hurdle here to be that guy, to be that sort of whatever torchbearer or whatever. And obviously Hurdle got traded, and if Couture got healthy, I guess that's part of it too. That if we have a healthy Couture here, then maybe I'm like, okay, then this trade is more fine, because you have a guy that is a very, very impactful leader too, a different kind of leader than Granlund, but also a very impactful leader in Couture to mentor your Celebrinis, etc. But you don't have Couture here. And so if you give a similar contract to a Granlund, I don't really see the issue in it, because you need I guess that's a thing we can argue about, but I think the Sharks are at a point, because they have the guy in Celebrini, that they can start to think about building this out instead of tearing it apart now, and building around making a team that is more competitive around Macklin. And giving a guy a 3-year contract with a high AAV is not counter. It's risky, of course, right? Like my great Brady Shea idea, right? That looks pretty stupid now, because I don't think Shea's been very good in Nashville. But I think that the premise of it made sense, though, that you have a media guy that you can plug in, that's a relative low risk, because the term is shorter, and that really helps you in multiple ways on the ice that you really need. And I think Granlund kind of fit the same mold, not as not as good a player, but or not as great a player as maybe you could have hoped for that role, but still a really, really good player. So yeah, I don't see any issue with it. I don't see this as a repeat of the Burns, Carlson, Vlasic, Couture contracts. I know the age ends up the same, but they're really not the same thing, though. And also, too, it is in this particular time of the Sharks rebuild that you need somebody to help make it better over the next couple of years, and somebody that's going to be good as Macklin gets better, as Will Smith gets better. And I think, again, that Granlund was the perfect fit for that.
Yeah, I guess again, he just, there's still an opportunity for Granlund to come back if that's the case.
Not likely though. So
I know, but it's still possible. So it's not like he gave
very,
that away.
very unlikely.
And even if it's not Granlund, it doesn't have to be Granlund. It could be
that's
somebody
fair.
else.
Yes. You can find somebody with that impact. Not in off season, more likely. I think Mike Weir even admitted that in season, though, that it's gonna be he said you probably can't replace him, like, because I asked specifically to end this season how it's gonna look. And I think on that point, I think that it had been a more normal season without the four nations kind of rushing things to some degree, that maybe Blackwood and Granlund would have been traded much later.
Yeah.
And it would have felt a lot better. It would have looked a lot better in the standings. The room would have felt a lot better. Everything would have just seemed a lot better. But now, though, the Sharks also, funny enough, of course, are on a pretty bad slide now.
Yeah.
And a kind of slide that's probably going to be exacerbated by losing their arguable MVP here in Granlund. And you're also putting this huge load on Will Smith, too, to kind of drag on Macklin Celebrini to now be your clear-cut number one center, and instead of having a guy share your load. And also, too, to be a guy that drags everybody into the fight, that leads everybody. And that's Macklin, I think, can do it, but that's a lot to throw on an 18-year-old. And I think it was good to have a guy like Granlund around to help him out in those areas that he didn't have to kind of do it all in some ways, like he will be charged to some degree. Not completely by himself, but definitely taking on a lot more of the load now, though, for sure.
I think, yeah, it's going to be rough. I will admit that. The last 28 games are going to be horrible. But, I mean, we've had 5 years of terrible Sharks hockey. We can endure another 28 games again. Whether I don't think Granlund's going to change that much. We've already seen that it didn't change that much, even if he was
but
good.
I'm talking about the next couple of years too, right? I'm not talking about just keeping Granlund and letting him walk as a free agent. Obviously, that's stupid. If Granlund wanted a contract that you weren't going to give him at all,
But
if you
okay,
wanted 6 years, if you wanted this or that,
yeah,
right? Okay, then you just trade him. Kind of like you trade Blackwood, right? You get what you can. You
yeah.
understand that he really does not fit as great a guy as he is, as good a fit as he is with Askarov, right? As good as fit as Blackwood would have been for the next couple of years in tandem with Askarov. But Granlund is a better fit than Blackwood in the coming years, and so I don't. So that's a big part of why I see it differently.
Macklin and Smith and Askarov and Eklund all need contracts in the next 2 years. Mm-hmm. So even if you sign Granlund for 3, you're putting that 3rd or 4 years. You're putting that 3rd and 4th year of Granlund, an expensive Granlund that's not going to be Granlund of today, probably.
Well, you don't know that. Granlund could be. He's not. He's not 43 trying to hang on. He's 33, so he could be just as good as he is now at 36. That's not like unprecedented, right? So
it's not.
so you shouldn't assume that he's going to be like a shadow of himself necessarily.
I know, but it's a risk, and you still have to pay your superstar guys.
That doesn't stop one for it though. We're not saying. I'm not saying, like, again, I haven't mentioned Cody Ceci at all. Like, I think Cody adds a lot to the room, et cetera, too, but he's not Granlund.
Yeah.
And so I haven't talked about Ceci at all, just for that reason, right? So let Cody go. Okay, I get that. But Granlund is a different sort of piece to the room. And that's what I'm, I guess, trying to emphasize here, that like keeping this piece even for an extra year or two into the new contracts for Eklund and Celebrini, etc., isn't, especially with this rising cap, isn't likely to be any hindrance.
Yeah. I think there will be other people that will do a similar job. I'm hopeful that there's going to be somebody else that can take up that mantle.
There are, but I guess it's one of those things where I would say that it's not as common as people think it is. And I'm not saying that it's impossible. It's also not like I said, there's different kinds of leaders that fit, right? Like Hertl, Couture, Granlund. The Sharks had 3 of them at one moment in that summer, and they thought that was going to be their 3 centermen, right, going into the 2023-24 season. And on paper, that looks pretty good. But so there are people that are theirs, but it's not as easy to acquire as people think it is. But yes, it's not impossible. True. And so, yeah, they're going to find somebody who's going to lead in a different way this summer. But I think, again, for what they get back here, that I'm not saying Granlund's untouchable, right? And I haven't said that at all. That I just would have wanted an overpayment. So you talk about a first and a prospect, a good like, let's say what Calgary got for Lindholm. Then then maybe we're talking a little bit more now about what I'm talking about. Like, okay, you really want this player, and if Dallas, you really want this player in Granlund, and so you're kind of paying through your nose a little bit. Okay, then that makes a little bit more sense. But this is just a fair deal, and taking a fair deal and not insisting on overpayment is kind of saying, like, okay, we value this player, Granlund, but we don't value him. The Sharks don't value him as much as clearly I am. So yeah, and that's fine. Obviously, and they make the decisions. They have more inside knowledge than I do. So I'm not arguing any of that stuff. But
I think they do value. I think that
they did, but they just value him at that. Right,
which I think it's a fair valuation, and
I didn't say it wasn't fair. I didn't say it wasn't fair, right?
Lindholm was a great example of how GMs fall in love with guys and then sign them to 8-year deals, and Lindholm is less than like 0.5 points per game.
Yeah, but
And
that's
this
again,
is
this is
how
a
this
whole
happened.
different player. Lindholm was younger too, so I understand why Boston
But
kind of made that
he's
move.
now going to sign this
But
contract to like the exact same age that Granlund's going to be when he finishes his next contract.
yeah, but the problem with Lindholm isn't even the length of the contract. It's just that Lindholm sucks at 28 or 29 or whatever he is now. That's not
He's
the
30.
question with Granlund. Granlund's 33, and Granlund is right now, he's a better player than Lindholm at the moment, right?
Yeah.
So we're not talking about the
History
same thing
tells
here.
us that they won't be. And
I'm not arguing that. I'm not pushing it back against aging curve or whatever, but I am again just saying that this player had a specific value in the room that cannot be replicated. That there's I haven't mentioned on the ice stuff much, right? Because you can replace the points. Someone else can play the power play and penalty kill, maybe better than Granlund. But the human element, that not that it's irreplaceable, but it is a lot harder to replace than I think you are accounting for, and a lot of the fans are accounting for. So again, I'm stressed. I'm not saying that it's irreplaceable, but it's not as easy as I think you're suggesting, and people in general think it is.
if it's so irreplaceable and he means so much to this locker room and
He just said
he
it's
wants
not
to be here, then he can
irreplaceable.
be here. It's not like it's he could be here after winning a damn Stanley Cup.
Why would you put it on him though? If you want a guy, you keep him.
Because
You had a chance to keep him. You had a chance to keep him. And again, my understanding of, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe he's going to sign a 7-year, $56 million contract with the Dallas Stars, an 8-year, and then it'll look stupid. But like, I think he was amenable to a contract that was reasonable to the Sharks' timeline.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if Blackwood was as amenable to that. Like, if Blackwood had been willing to sign a 2-year, let's say $13 million contract, man, Blackwood's a really great fit for the room. He really gets along with Askarov. He's a great mentor for Askarov in a lot of ways. They're both kind of like goofball kind of guys, not goofball, but like oddball kind of guys, right? That are like no one to play and no one to be serious kind of guys, right? So they were a great fit for each other. And if Blackwood had been willing to sign something like that, then I would have said the same thing, that maybe you should have kept him.
Sure.
And I'm under the impression that, not to say, I don't know the length, I don't know dollar figures, 2 years, 3 years, whatever. I don't know any of that, but I am under the impression that, again, that this is something that could have worked between Granlund and the Sharks. That he wasn't like, I need my last contract right now.
I said the same thing when he traded Blackwood. I think Greer has this, and he even mentioned it, his availability. And Greer finds the deal and then hits the price and then he doesn't wait for, a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush. He doesn't wait for the two in the bush. He's like, this is it. This is it.
That's fine. But the one thing that, like, I've criticized Mike in consistently, I think the last couple of years is team building. Mm-hmm. And he built a terrible team last year, and we saw it. And it was not even just a terrible team in results. It was also the fit. And so many things were wrong with it. It made very little sense. And I'm not going to go into that because
he built it on purpose.
And we talked, huh?
He built it on purpose, though.
Yes and no.
He built a terrible team on purpose.
Not that bad. Not that bad. No one builds a team that bad on purpose. But
he at least knew where the outcome was going to be with that team that he built.
Yeah, I understand that, but again, not that bad, and also too a lot of influences in the room that weren't useful to the young players that you did have around, like Eklund and Zetterlund. You lucked into Granlund there in that sense. So
you lucked into it by also getting him in the trade.
And again, the credit and luck too. So I get all that, but I just wrote a story about this. Actually, the my 9 takeaways from Mike's midseason availability. And my biggest thing was that, whether you believe it or not, Mike said, maybe he shouldn't have said it, but Mike said that he thought that this Sharks team that he had built this year was maybe
the
like
8th worst.
eighth, like would have ended up somewhere around there, right? Obviously, the record is much worse than that. I think the truth is in between, that he did definitely build a better team than last year, and a team that probably, if maybe they don't trade Blackwood early, they get a couple of bounces, that they are kind of more in the third or fourth worst team range. I don't know. That's a little bit semantics to some degree, right? But the point of it all, though, is that that there are still questions about how Mike can build a team. We know that he can. We know one thing I do love about Mike Greer is that he is ballsy. That you see this in so many moves, right? That yeah, he's not afraid to make the big move, and so that's good. That's a quality of his. But has he built sensible teams and that's going to be the question mark. Is he going to? He built, I think, a sensible team this year for a rebuild this year, not last year, but this year he did. And it obviously didn't work out fully in terms of where they are in the standings. But okay, like this team makes a lot more sense to me. But can he make the moves in the coming years to build a winning team and be more than a GM that is great at accruing draft capital, that has been great at turning distressed assets into something better? Give him credit for that. It also helps that he's in a situation where he can give these guys a ton of playing time too. But credit to him for that, though. He has done a good job with that, right? But there's another element now you have a piece like Macklin, which he did luck into, because obviously the lottery balls, worst team in the league. It's still luck though. But now he has a piece like Macklin that you can build around, and you can project out the next decade or so and say, this is the guy that is going to lead us back into the playoffs, back to hopefully a Stanley Cup. Okay, can he build the right pieces around Macklin? And I think that Granlund could have been one of those kind of bridge pieces. And Mike kind of thought so, but didn't think so enough, obviously. And so it's kind of a shades of disagreement. Obviously, Mike Greer likes Granlund, and the Sharks love Granlund, Warren Rosowski, and all those guys, right? But so it's shades of disagreement. But I think that, again, that if you weren't going to knock my socks off, that this is a guy that I want for the transition from rebuild to the playoffs.
I think the argument is the first the first round pick could be used to acquire a piece that's going to be more important.
Like I said, wait and see, right? But I'm just judging the trade as it is now. So, So that, in that sense, we're kind of going in circles because, of course, I have no idea what they're going to do with the first. They turned the first into another version of Askarov. Then okay, then there's less reason for me to kind of carp about it. But
I think it is telling that he mentioned it, right? And these are the kind of things that Greer's done in the past. Is like he mentions we need to, or Joe Will did, but we need to acquire a younger goalie. That kind of thing.
He's tended to also add players that are a little closer in the timeline, because I think he does want to compete sooner. A guy like Mikael Madulin, other guys like that I mean, Kovalenko in the Blackwood trade, right? Guys that are closer to helping right now. And so, yes, it wouldn't surprise me if he uses this first in that same kind of way. But of course, then who knows who he's going to bring in and how I'm going to feel about that particular player, right? But until he makes that move, though, I can't really judge that. So
if ifs and buts were candies and nuts, there it is, something like that. Basically, it's a lot of ifs here. There's too many ifs, and we're going in circles, I think, a little bit. But
we are a little bit, but there are a lot of ifs. But I don't like the trade now, and maybe I'll like it better later. So
I don't think it's his worst trade.
I never said it was. I said that it was fair.
What is his worst trade? Let's think about that. What is?
Well, the AC Mon one was terrible. I think for what the Sharks needed at the time. The Brett Burns was a terrible deal in the end.
Yeah, it's probably Burns.
In terms of the magnitude of a trade, that was obviously a big name player that still had a lot left, even if his
he might come back
reputation was reduced.
I'm just joking
about that. Yeah,
just joking. But he is ending his UFA at 40.
He is a UFA.
Still going to probably play next year because he still has more in the tank. It seems like.
So that's probably a clear-cut worse one, and that one I didn't really quite see at the time, but that one was a pretty bad one.
This is not the worst trade that Mike Greer has made.
Okay, so if that's your closing statement,
I think it's. I don't think it's like his best trade. I think the Erik Karlsson trade is his best trade, and that's still going to be my opinion for the end of time. I think that was striking with such an at the exact moment where the iron was hot with a team that wanted him for whatever reason.
And I think it is. Yeah, I think it is a good discussion for the at the time. I think it's too easy to look at the Erik Karlsson trade and look at, they turned Mikael Granlund into. No one thought Mikael Granlund was becoming a first round.
Even at the time, I loved it though. It was great.
I know you did. That's my point. So I think the trade that I liked the most of his at the time was probably the Hurdle trade.
Interesting.
Yeah, I would say that one. Yeah, because I knew that Hurdle wanted to leave, and yeah, like I thought that return was great for a player that with a big contract that.
Yeah,
I don't know if there was a ton of interest just because of the size of the contract, not the quality of the player or the person. But so I and also too the backlash that I'm sure he knew that would get to trade such a popular player to the most bitter rival, the Sharks' most bitter rival. So all that combined. So I really liked that move at the time. That's one that I had. I don't think I had much of anything but praise. I even defended all the third round picks that people hated.
I would say that it would be pretty awesome right now to have Hurdle as like your 2C with Celebrini as your 1C. It would be pretty awesome right now. But it's
if the guys had wanted to stay, right? I think that's a big part of it. If Hurdle wanted to stay, if Karlsson wanted to stay, like that should be a consideration when a guy really likes it here and wants to stay. And that's part of my point. Like, if you have him signed and he is a happy and willing and enthusiastic participant of leader of your rebuild, then you don't take that lightly. And that's part of the, again, that's part of, I think of one of Granlund's pluses. Yeah. That he was that. So.
Well, I think that it's going to be awesome to actually have some players to root for in the Stanley Cup final. So.
Well, you want him to for the Sharks though. You don't want him to make it that far.
I want for him too. I want him to make it that far. Like I want to make it that far because we get a better pick, but also just because it'd be awesome if
if he makes it that far, you get a worse pick. What are you talking about?
Well, yeah, but you also you get a fourth to a third. So
that's true, but I think I do
have a higher first.
You want a higher first. Yeah.
I don't know. I honestly I don't see this draft pick as being long for the Sharks repertoire.
Yeah, that's a good perspective. If you were to ask me, my guess is that the Sharks don't make that pick too. So for what it's worth,
one way or another, either up or down or out, up, down, or out. I don't think they just stick at it.
But I don't think that's where we are. My argument of overpayment would have been like, okay, get a first, get a more NHL ready prospect, and then that's what you walk away with, and then you trade the first for something, and you have your prospect too in your back pocket, the guy who's going to play for you pretty soon. That's kind of more along the lines of what I would have liked in the trade. So,
but I think the issue again is what Granlund means to the Sharks probably means more than he does to other teams, and then you're having to deal with GMs that are not seeing Granlund that you see Granlund.
That's fair. That's fair. And so again, that's why I say it was fair. It was a fair trade because that is probably what Granlund is worth on the open market. He doesn't have Lindholm's reputation, fair or not. He does have some drawbacks, older, smaller, right? For playoff hockey, he does have some drawbacks. But so I agree with that part of it that this was that's why I say it was fair. So
it's fair, but not your favorite trade.
Nope.
Okay, so we've covered up most of our topics. So the last topic we have is what does the rest of the Sharks season look like, and who gets called up? That's a good outline. Bad. It's going to be really bad.
Yeah,
not just because of Granlund, but also the defense. Like
pretty ugly. Yeah. Ceci was. I know a lot of people didn't like him, but Ceci was the second most used Sharks defenseman, the top shutdown guy. I think a better player than a lot of people give him credit for. So that's gonna hurt. And obviously Granlund, like I mentioned, led the Sharks in overall power play and shorthanded ice time. That's gonna hurt. And in terms of the rest of the season, how that's gonna not though ugly, but in terms of who they call up, actually, I think it's gonna be a mix. I think the Sharks have emphasized rewarding guys, veteran guys. And so I know a lot of fans will be like, "Oh, why they call him up?" But I think Podorowski is going to get a call up, going to get a look. Podorowski's been amazing in the AHL this season, so he'll get a chance. I don't think guys like that sign here too, unless you kind of say to them like, "Hey, we'll give you kind of a couple games here to at least show that maybe something's changed. Maybe you have become overnight a NHL middle six player. So you give guys that chance if they're so good in the AHL and they sign here. So there's that obviously. There's also maybe you move Will Smith back to center because ultimately that's where you want him to be.
Yep.
We didn't even mention that actually. That I think if you look at a lot of Will Smith's scoring, and a lot of it's been at even strength to Will's credit, but a lot of it has been on Granlund's line.
Yes,
and so how that sort of affects Will is, I think, a worthwhile question too, at least for the rest of the season. But yeah, I mean, Beasted has actually, I watched Beasted last night in Barracuda game. I like Beasted a lot, but I still think of him as a lot of tools and not a lot of coordination of it all yet, at least in the NHL. So yeah, so there's that. Mikael Madulin's an obvious guy to get called up. He had a very good game last night for the Barracuda. That's Friday's game. And so, yeah, there's going to be, even though he's not right-handed, there's going to be a spot on the roster for him.
Do you think that he's, you think it's, because they're probably going to call up a D. They have 6 active D right now, right. 2 of them being Thrun and Thompson, who are not solidified in the lineup every night. Well, Thrun a little bit, and then Vlasic obviously in and out with injuries and such.
Yeah, Ruda is hurt right now, so that's
hurt
a guy that who may or may not be here, of course, after the deadline. But
so yeah, I wonder if we get a 3-game showcase for somebody like Mikael Madulin or
Cagnoni, I think there's a good chance of that. Yeah, that's possible too. Cagnoni was very good last night too. Yeah, I somewhat Cagnoni, I think, will get that look. I think more a taste though. I think even though he's had a better AHL season than Mikael Madulin, that Mikael Madulin is more ready for the NHL than Cagnoni. That's at least my opinion.
And last time Mikael Madulin was called up, it was directly after one of his best games in a while.
Right, that's true. So, yeah, that was he got called up for the St. Louis game, the game in St. Louis.
So same thing could happen.
Yeah, and it just opens it up a roster spot. You might mix and match centers. You might see Luke Cunnin play more higher end center because you need to have him there. Just like last year at this point, right? Maybe you put Eklund out there again, see how he does this time around. And then that opens up a spot for Gushin to get a look, Bordolo to get a look before they become RFAs. So So it definitely does open up, those minutes that Granlund plays on the power play and penalty kill and just all over the place. It opens up a lot of minutes, not just for a centerman, but for really any of the skill Barracuda forwards. Colin Graff can come back up, and so yeah. But I just I want to mention some of the veteran guys too, because that's going to happen too, I believe.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's not like it's all going to be Barracuda guys, and I'm sure people are going to be upset that Podorowski is getting a shot and Bordalo or Gushin or not. But this is the way that NHL teams work, and here he's earned it. So
yeah, and that's sort of like I said, guys don't sign here if they know that you're only going to call up the under 23 prospects.
Yeah, I mean Podorowski's had 6 NHL games, and he's averaged 9 minutes a night. And is 31. I mean, he's 31 years old. So, and every year he dominates the AHL.
Yeah, he leads AHL in scoring now.
He's put me in the fucking game, please.
Every year, actually, just I was at the game yesterday, talked with Andrew. He's going to be AHL All-Star this weekend, so congratulations to him. But one thing I wanted to mention in correlation with that is you hear wonders about how he and Jimmy Schultz, both coming from the Coachella Valley Firebirds, who made it to the Calder Cup final the last 2 years, just how much they've meant to that Barracuda room and the word I've heard is transformed.
Yeah.
And you look at their record, right? And they're a big part of it, both Polarowski and Schultz. And so you can't tell me a guy like that doesn't deserve a couple games in NHL. A guy like Beasted, he's gonna get his time. You don't have to worry about Philip Beasted or a younger guy like that. They're gonna get their chances.
Yeah.
Even if they leave, a guy like Gushin, right? Like someone's gonna want to sign him if Gushin walks as a free agent this year. So I think it's great that these older guys get a shot, and maybe they stick. Maybe they show something that they hadn't shown before, and so yeah.
It's and there's also, I think they're still going to acquire guys too. I think Greer mentioned that too.
Of course.
There's still probably going to be new guys coming in. Like we have new additions that we haven't even talked about, like Walker Dewar as well, and Pavel.
Well, yeah, but I think more around the deadline, right? That maybe like instead of trading Cutton for just a draft pick, maybe you trade him for a younger version of Luke Cutton, that kind of thing, right? So sure.
Yeah. So there's, I think, more guys probably to come in, as well as some rotation of some Barracuda guys and vets, and a lot of losing, and also Askar's probably going to be in the AHL for a little while.
Yeah, that's what I've always maintained. Yeah, I don't.
Yeah. I think the timing makes a lot of sense. Him going back for the All-Star game, and then the break and Vanacek and everything.
Well, maybe he comes back for this week though, just because Vanacek is the conditioning assignment that Vanacek is on. He can be on it for 14 days.
Yeah.
And so it kind of depends on what the Sharks think and what Vanacek thinks. If he needs a little more of a tune-up, he did look good last night. Vanacek did, but yeah, it's not a given in my mind that Askarov is
going
done right now with the NHL. I can see him coming back next week, and then he's done for a while, at least until like maybe the trade deadline if they manage to move one of the goalies, or definitely, of course, the playoffs. But
we're gonna have such a fun off season of trying to pick how to build this team. I feel like, because there's gonna be all these holes and guys that are gonna be on the market. We're gonna have
you think it's fun, but then like you put together. I guess that's part of like maybe it's not fatigue, but like you found the right fit with Granlund, and who I think would have come back at a reasonable contract length. And instead of filling your summers with your Mike Hoffmans or Philip Zadinas that like are just sort of shots in the dark, really, and it seems fun, but then you start to play and they're like, oh, this is ugly.
That's bad.
That's the feeling that I got last year, right? Because I was like,
sure.
Oh, maybe with these centermen, you have good centermen. The wingers are not great two-way wingers, but you have good two-way centermen, and maybe they'll score enough. And I thought that, maybe this is going to be a fun team that scores a lot, that gets like 70 points or something like that. And the guys didn't score, and it got ugly real fast, right? It got dark real fast in San Jose last year. So so it seems fun, but when you have a set it and forget it piece like Granlund that kind of falls in your lap as a cap dump, like I said, I would have tried harder to keep him. So
darkness is coming. So I wish it was I still think the Sharks are going to get a top 4 pick. There's still things to look out for that are going to be fun.
You think they're going to get a top 4 pick? You sure?
I think so. I think so. And the top 4 are pretty good this year. They're not amazing, but they're pretty good. So I don't know. It's gonna be dark, but it'll be fine. We're still gonna see Macklin Celebrini. We're still gonna see William Macklin and Will Smith hopefully do well.
And I would emphasize too that like unlike last year, granted last year you lost Couture and Hurdle like pretty early because Hurdle got hurt too, so it was a longer stretch of bad games too. But you didn't get the benefit of trading Blackwood and Granlund on trade deadline day when there's like 15 games left or however number of games left. No, you're trading them. You traded both of them quite a bit earlier, and so 28 games is going to feel like a long 28 games is going to, let's reverse numbers. 28 is going to feel like 82.
It might. Yeah. It's going to feel like
months here. So
it's going to feel like a tale of 2 seasons.
At least for me, when I need to write a fucking story after every game and try to,
Yep. It's going to be like
all the things, big picture on it. So
yeah, it's going to feel like a brand new season starting on Tuesday is their next game, right?
Yeah, they see Granlund actually and Ceci on February 8th. So that's kind of fun.
Yeah, this defense is rough. I'm more scared about that. And I know that CC is not everybody, like you said, he's not everybody's favorite, but he's not like we could just plug in somebody that's going to eat 21 minutes. We can't. So
yeah, be physical and be a good net front guy, be a good battle guy, wall people off in front of the net like CC does well, things like that. Those are just not.
and still
Yeah,
kind of make a good breakout every once in a while too.
yeah. He's not a great puck mover, but he's not bad though. He's not as
Awful.
yeah. He's not bad at it. I think he's just okay.
Yeah.
Maybe poor to okay, but yeah.
I honestly was really surprised, and that's not something we didn't even mention, but that there wasn't any salary coming back. And I know that Dallas has Sagan and Lundqvist on a long-term injured reserve and everything, but I just assumed that they were going to pull a roster player and a defender back, or one.
Yeah,
Or two.
maybe that's why. Because like I said, I thought the CC return was just a tad light because I thought that CC was good enough to get you a solid third, not a conditional third. But maybe that was part of it, that they had to take on a little bit of money, so that was sort of like, hey, and the Sharks can't retain, so
yeah. That's true.
Yeah,
it was just full contracts, which is kind of strange and rare that you don't get anything back either. Like normally, like once you add 2 players to your roster, you have to put somebody back on the other side. And
right, yeah, even one of those like AHL guys that's never going to play for you, right? Just to I guess Dallas. I don't know their contract number, but it must have worked, especially with Sagan being on LTIR, right? So.
Yeah, it was just the Sagan and Lundqvist.
Oh, exciting! Dallas is going for that Vegas thing. Sagan. I listened to Jim Nill today, and Jim Nill said that Sagan's coming back at some point. Didn't say when, so that sounds like
they're doing the Vegas thing,
the Mark Stone music.
Yeah, Lundqvist is out for the whole year. He got surgery, I think today, or announced he had surgery yesterday or something. So he's out for the whole year.
Right.
That's why they were like, "Oh shit, we need a right-sided D-man."
Oh, and then Heiskanen too is out for quite a while, right?
Quite a while.
Not the season, but for a while.
So they
because of Mark Stone. So
yeah, so they just said they didn't
fits. It's all connected. Yeah.
They just didn't need to give us anything back, which all right, that's fine, I guess. I just thought that somebody was coming back. Like they have like a Colin Blackwell on a 1-year contract right now.
Well, they use Colin Blackwell on a PK, so
yeah, or
they actually kind of need him. Yeah, Sam Still too. So would have been somebody lower on the depth chart.
Would have been an AHL guy that like. But anyway, it's just surprising. I thought there would be somebody, but there wasn't. So, or Matt Dumba. I heard that name a lot, but anyway, I guess Greer didn't want the salary because Matt Dumba has another year on it too. So.
Oh yeah, I think that's a part of it, right? Yeah, like I actually thought that a guy like Brandon Saad is just complete aside, but when he hit waivers, 1 year left at $4.5 million. I don't know too much about how Saad's game has declined, so I'm not sure about that. But I thought, it's only 1 year, and here's a guy that's won championships, and here's a guy that can score. And the Sharks could use some scoring, and so if he's a good room guy, yeah, maybe you take him for that year. But obviously, he passed through waivers, so I think that extra year is. Like I said, this is actually going back to the Granlund thing. That extra year for maybe too much. So I agree, but like really messes with GM's heads because they're just like, I don't know if I want that guy on my team next year.
Yeah,
even if you're willing to trade for a first for him this year, but 2 years ago you're like, I don't know if I want the guy on my team for 2 years. So
yeah,
I think
it's kind of strange.
A funny thing. Yeah.
So and then I was surprised, but also kind of proud that Mike Greer did not claim Adam Boqvist because he was put on waivers this week, and Adam Boqvist is like a high draft pick.
Oh yeah, no, that's not his type. That's not his type. Yeah.
Well, it was when he got Kalen Addison, right? Like that was
that's not his type. That was desperation and need.
I'm saying
that was Kyle Burrows. No, that was Kyle Burrows is running our power play. We need somebody. So that.
Right now we have Wallman, I guess, but that's it.
Yeah, I get what you're saying, that in terms of like turning a lower end asset into something better. So I get that. I think that's where you're going with it. But like,
yes, I'm trying to say that
a player is not Mike Greer's type.
No, I know, but I'm saying he had done it before and has tried, but it didn't. He decided not to, which means that he learned
your
from the mistake.
Your response to JD of the
Ryan
Merkley rookie card was on point. No notes. So.
I love that because it was like, oh yeah, that's just Ryan Merkley, right? That's just who that is. Yeah, and it's funny. That's like the fifth guy. Like there's just so many of these dudes that are the exact same defenseman that keep just getting passed around waivers till they're 24 and then out of the league. And it's very funny.
You hope they learn a modicum of defense. If they do, then they're useful. If they don't, then they're just like, yeah, okay, you can get us 25 points if you give you a ton of power play time in NHL, but you can't do shit else, And so that's
so it's just very funny. It just seems like there's been like so many of those dudes over the past like 3, 4, 5 years. Every year. And Adam Boqvist is the last one who's now been claimed by
Eric Brandstrom. That's a guy I keep hearing that like I don't think will ever show up for the Sharks, but you never know, need or whatever. Like if Adam Boqvist had hit waivers at the exact time that Kalen Addison had, then I'm probably Mike probably claims Boqvist instead of giving up, I think, a 5th round pick for Addison. But that's not his type of player.
I'm saying he learned.
I know. I'm just laughing. That's not his type of player, though. Yeah.
He learned. It wasn't going to work out. And who knows? Maybe it'll work out for the Islanders. Probably not. But history says otherwise.
Yeah, she says otherwise. Yeah, she says otherwise.
All right. Anything else that we have on this? I thought this would be a shorter episode. It's already been an hour and a half.
We've been. I gotta walk Mushu and.
You got to go to the
Barracuda game. I don't think I'll make that. Yeah, because that game started at 6. It's 7 now. So we'll see. Maybe I'll change my mind.
They are in the second period. Let's see. I had it pulled up here.
I got to walk Mushu first. Yeah. So.
1-0. And only 5 minutes into the second. So you still got time for the third. You got this.
Yeah, we'll see. Maybe.
All right, y'all. We will be back next time with, I don't know, probably during the Four Nations or something like that. We'll see. And we or unless Grant Banker makes another trade, then we'll come back again. But anything else, Sheng?
Yeah, actually, I'm just looking at one of my Twitter. I may as well just respond to this that Prince Squiggly, who is on Twitter, who reads a lot, so thank you for following. But he didn't like my Granlund article, or at least didn't like this part of it. That didn't Sheng say on the podcast that he wouldn't do the trade unless it was 1st round pick. We get a 1st round pick and he's still upset.
It's true.
Well, I don't think I ever said that, like, for sure that, I was still kind of in a think about it mode. And so that I wasn't like 1st round pick. Let's make the trade. So that's what I would caution here, Prince. I do appreciate the comment. I do appreciate you following and reading. But so it's a little different. It wasn't like, I don't think I've really changed in it. It wasn't like you get that automatically, I'm in. It's not like that. So.
Yeah. Oh, also, we haven't even mentioned Brent Clark might be available. Probably not to the Sharks.
Oh, that's not. I don't think that's a real thing. Yeah.
No, I don't think so either. But it is interesting that it was tweeted. I don't know. That's it's so weird. That was Kevin Weeks again.
Yeah, but if you phrase what he said, or you look at what he said, he could have just meant that they are looking to trade somebody to make space for the guy, right? That's how I looked at that. It wasn't clear cut. They're trading Clark. So
I think they would be absolutely insane to do that. But I don't think they will. So anyway, that's the kind of thing maybe we're on the lookout for now.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, you trade that Dallas pick for Brent Clark, okay,
Yeah, then we're looking better.
Yes.
You trade that entire draft class you got for Simon Nemec or something.
You are for sure, yeah.
A 1st, a 2nd, a 3rd, a 4th, and a 5th. That's an impressive amount of draft picks for free. That's all. That's it. It's not something that happens a lot.
All right. My career masterclass. All right, Jesus, Keegan.
At least from getting draft capital, and he's cold-hearted. He's calculating. Normally you're the one who's hyping up.
Like I said, he is ballsy. So.
Normally you're the one who's hyping up Greer more than me, but I feel like I'm hyping him up more this episode than you are.
It depends. Like I said, right? I like the Askarov trade a bit. I like the Hurdle trade. I actually was lukewarm about both the Carlson and Meyer trades, right? I remember. So and of course you like the Carlson trade quite a bit, right? So I think it changes stuff.
He has not made a disastrous trade yet, so that's also a good thing. Unless this turns out to be a disastrous, the locker room never recovers. I don't think he's made a disastrous trade.
No, I mean locker room will recover. I'm not trying to make it sound like Mikael Granlund's your Lord and Savior.
He's your Macklin Celebrini. He's your William Macklin.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, locker room will recover, but
yeah,
I think yeah. Anyway, I don't need to get into that part of it. But yeah. I think has Mike made a disastrous trade? I feel like he has. But let me think about it. We can get into it some other episode. So yeah. So yeah.
Sharks fans would say Luke Cunnin. No, I'm kidding.
Well, they would say that. Yeah, they would say that. Yeah.
A third and Ryan Leonard was a bridge too far.
A third and Ryan Leonard would have been problematic, but third and John Leonard, not
sorry. Shit. Other Leonard. My brain has only been thinking about Ryan Leonard for 4 years. I forgot that the other one's named John. Sorry, John. I apologize. Hope you're doing well, John. All right, let's get out of here. Anything else?
Nope. Yeah. We'll come back with a more regular episode next week. We had a guest lined up actually, so good topic. We can also discuss more Granlund with him too. So excited for that episode. It should be a good conversation. Or maybe it'll be another trade. Maybe it'll be an emergency Luke Cunnin trade podcast, and it'll just be me weeping. So
it's going to be 3 hours long. I'm going to leave the room, and you're just going to cry.
Lamentations. I don't like Luke that much. I really like Luke, but not that much, though, guys.
Well, they didn't trade him. He's still here. He's in the locker room doing great. All right, y'all. Hope you have a good week. Bye.